Ian, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to talk about wax just for a short period of time. Everybody, I have a Fat Bee Man group, and I see there's a lot of people putting so much stuff on. This is a block of wax, lemon yellow, and it's basically cosmetic. And you see it's fairly clean all the way around. And all this is 4 to 5 frames max in about 2 gallons of water, and then it is poured through a strainer, a house strainer, like you strain your spaghetti. And then I take a hive tool and I press it out. And from that point, I make 2 more boils with it, and I put about a quart or a quart and a half of water in, and then I'll put about 6 or 8 of those pieces in, and that's the wax I get. You can see it's basically really clear. So I'm just mentioning that because a lot of people on my group is talking about paint filters, coffee filters, sheer curtains, you name it, and they're pouring it through there. And I've got all them things down in the basement. I show new students. You waste a lot of wax. That block of wax there is $70. Now, if you can see it, it's about 3 pounds. So that is your money of the beehive. The next thing is your propolis. And the main thing you want to do is save all your products. And there's a lot of people posting stuff, and I'm not saying you shouldn't post stuff on the Fat Bee Man group, but we try to have our students use mediums and deeps, and people are putting 30 and 40 frame long hives there. I used to run 10-frame hives. The reason I got away from it and I went to 8-frame and 5-frame just build up so much faster. Now, when it comes to your box, whether you're going to use a 10-frame, an 8-frame, or a 5-frame, if it says 10-frame, put 10 frames in it. The minute you put spacers in there, you start to violate the bee space. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get burr comb or brace comb in there. And when you pull a frame out, you're going to roll queens. Now, if you've got an 8-frame box, you can put 7. If you've got a 10-frame box, you can put 9. But be at least 18 to 20 inches above the bottom board. That means at least 2 deep boxes. From that point, all you're going to do is get wider comb or honey. Now, on an 8-frame box, I've even gone down to 6 frames, 3 boxes or 3.5 boxes high. So that's what you want to think about. It's just to make it easier for extracting. And now the frames that you put in, make sure that you use, if you're going to sell bees, make sure you use new frames. Now there's big conversation, I guess, on my page there about people getting into beekeeping and only run deeps. There's probably 4 students I have that have to run mediums because they have bad backs or have rods in their back or really have bad problems. But I sell as many medium nukes as I do deeps. So everybody is saying there's no market for mediums. There's just as big a market for mediums, and it's growing every year. People with bad backs, a lot of ladies, small statured people don't want to lift a big box. If you want to bust your back down on big boxes, you know, you can go right for it. Now, the resale on bees is pretty good. For $500, taking classes here, buy stock, buy 25 hives, nuke boxes, or you can buy 25 packages. You can get on my webpage as a student. I want you to maintain that stock in it. So basically, if you're around the country, I will send you business. I have people in just about all states right now that are selling my bees. And in Texas, there's a lot of people starting to get into bees because that tax exempt thing. There's Jim. He can tell you about it. We got 2 or 3 other people out in Texas that's getting started. So it's a thing to think about. Inspection, be sure you get your inspection sticker. If you're buying stock from people that say they're mine, they should have stickers that say they're from mine. There's a state inspection sticker we put on our packages when we ship them. Now, if you're just getting started, you can come here. A lot of students come here. Several of them from up north come down. buy 50 or 100, 150 packages. You can mark them up $50, and when you haul them up north and sell them, you can pay for part of your bees. Nukes right now with my stock up north are selling $225 and up. I sell mine $175 up to $25. If you buy over $25, then we start cutting price down to $150. And if you make nukes and you can't sell them, you bring them here and I'll market them for you. So the chat is the best place to get on. If you're starting a business for $10 a month, and we go 2 times a month, it costs you $5, and you get thousands of views. What you need to do is mention your web page. You got a web page, say what your web page is. If you're selling bees, say you're selling bees. If you're selling honey, then you tell people you're selling honey. So with that there, I'm going to let people ask questions right now. If it's about business, we'll do that. And I see Mark is joining us. Mark is a state inspector up in New York. He does pollinating. So if you have pollinating questions, he might give you some answers on that. So if you got a question, we'll start taking questions. I see Pat's got her hand up first.
First up here is Josh.
Okay.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, let's see here. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
You're unmuted.
All right, I see the mute sign up there. I didn't know. Okay. So anyway, my girlfriend and I, we both work full-time 9-to-5 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But we run a small business on the side. And what we do is we sell vegetables out of our 1-acre market garden at farmers markets throughout the summer. And we sell body care products, lotion bars, lip balms, and whatnot. Chicken eggs, duck eggs, all the good stuff. And we just recently started selling honey out of our beehive. Now, what we want to know is if we expand our bee yard by 10 hives per year, maybe, I don't know what our goal might be, maybe 150, 200 hives in total. I don't know. What advice would you want to give me to add bees an additional source of income?
How many hives do you have now?
Oh, I don't have very many. I just have one.
Well, you probably could take one hive, but you're going to sell honey, so you're going to want them a little stronger. I would say buy you 10 packages or buy 10 nukes. That's going to give you some stock to work from. That way you can make splits. 10 hives or 10 nukes, you should be able to make 2 to 3 splits off of each one with no problem.
Okay. I was planning on in the spring splitting this hive into 7 to 10 hives, if it makes it, because it's a double deep hive. And
if you have experience, a double deep 10 hive could be split that many times, but go easy. Watch the videos I put out. Talk to other students. Go easy because you have nothing to fall back on. If you had 2 hives, then if you kind of make a mistake, you can always use that other hive as a backup. Pull brood out and make some queen's net. It all sounds easy until you get in there and start making splits.
Okay. Other than that, is there any other advice you'd give me moving forward as I progress into maybe selling these?
If you're going to sell honey or if you're going to sell bees, the best advice I give you is figure out what you have to, you got to have a bottom line. I wouldn't try to compete with surrounding neighbors that are selling honey. I don't do it. I'm probably getting $6 more a jar than most people getting, but I don't put chemical in my hive. So if that's going to be your marketplace, chemical free, you don't have that much competition. And you can also, if you got a standard vegetable, a good selling point is get some little tongue depressors and some little wooden sticks there and have a jar open, let them taste it. That sells honey faster than anything else because the question will be, how come yours is more? And when they taste it, they can taste the difference. They'll say, it don't taste like anything they've tasted before. That's the best advice I'd give you.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to sell honey, beeswax, propolis, packages, queens. I wanted to get into it all.
Well, the only advice I would give you is I give to my students. If you come here and you want to make a living selling bees, don't spread yourself out. Focus more on one or two things. If you want to sell bees, you don't want to be making soap and candles and everything else. Sell bees, queens, and packages. Kind of focus on that. When you start going in a lot of different directions, there's no one thing that's going to get your full attention. You can dabble in it all, but be good at what one thing you want to do.
Okay. That pretty much answers my question. The only other thing I wanted to ask you was when was the best time to come down and take a class off you? But I think you already answered that. You said January.
Well, January, I take my students' orders and stuff. I try to get down because I have a lot of students that come here, buy packages and nukes to resell. So, you know, if you can't sell bees, I mean, there's something wrong right now. The market is open.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wanted to have some fat bee man bees up here in Pennsylvania.
They sell themselves, believe me.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Anthony. Go ahead,
Hello,
Anthony.
everybody. I only tried melting wax once, and it was a disaster. And I didn't use water, and it was a hell of a mess. And can you take black wax and have it come out yellow like you have in your hand?
This is from brood kit chambers.
And it was very dark or black when you started.
That's just a natural progression bees do. Each time a cocoon or a bee is hatched out, you're going to get a cocoon in there. The longer it sits in, the darker it's going to get.
Yeah.
The first year, it's usually a cocoa color. And then when it starts turning dark brown or black, it's usually 3 to 5 years old. But by melting it down and changing your water out 3 to 4 times, that has been run through water and boiled 3 times.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know about the water deal, and I won't take up time now. I'll look at the videos and see what you.
It's hard to try to do it. I see a lot of people that are posting, put them in a crock pot. A crock pot would probably work good if you took this block and put a cup of water or 3/4 of a cup of water in a crock pot and put this in. You could pour wax or make candles or make little things. But when you got old comb cocoons in it, you need a more water ratio in order to flush the dirt to the bottom.
Yeah, okay. I'll check the video.
Okay.
And I probably already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's your view on a long laying? And the reason I'm asking you that is my back.
Well, there's a lot of people that's posting stuff about those, you know. There's a lot of people that come up with these ideas, and this is a light bulb just went off in their head. And somebody had posted about 14 or 15-inch long frames. That's not a new idea. Daydent had that in the early 40s and 50s. It was called a Daydent jumbo hive. When I first got on, I said I used to run 10 frame. If it was doing that well, don't you think I would have stayed with a 10 frame? As far as build up and everything, an 8 frame builds up faster, and a 5 frame actually builds up faster yet. Bees built vertically faster than they build horizontally. They're going to stay in that cluster.
Yeah, and especially the ones I have, it just looks like they do not like to spread out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to spread out.
Your best bet is go 8 frame, and if you got a bad back, then maybe go all mediums. You could run deeps in the bottom if you want it, and then the rest all mediums, and do it like I do, and I'm running deeps. I pull 1 frame out. I carry a wheelbarrow or a roll of wheelbarrow around the bee yard. I open a hive up. If it's a deep frame and it's full of honey, I have an extra box in the wheelbarrow, and I'll put that frame in there and then put an empty frame back. That's how I work my hives. There's no point in lifting all that weight.
And I do similar. I have an extra table out there beside my hives, and I can take them out and put them on the rack, put them in a box, put it in the table. I'm not going to lift the whole box. It takes a little longer, and they're exposed a little longer with the cover off, but they don't seem to mind at all. So
what I usually do in a wheelbarrow is I take a lid, turn it upside down, set my deep box in it, and put a lid on top of the deep box. Keep it covered all the time. So you just got a few minutes, a few seconds most of the time. When you open a hive, you pull a frame out, shake the bees off, put it into the box, cover it up right away. If there's a few bees on it, when you take the lid off again, those older field bees will fly back to the hive. The simplest way.
Okay, I'll let someone else ask a couple of questions. I'll come back. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Ernest. Go ahead. Ernest?
Oh, okay. I was setting your half asleep, I guess. Good evening.
Did I put you to sleep already?
No, I've had a hard day, yeah. I've been making some mini mating nukes, and I'm putting a hole right at the bottom with that little circle to close it so that you can clean the bottom of the hive. Did you put a landing board on those? Been there mating nuke or just no landing board?
No, I just make them square. Mine are 8 inches wide. I think they're 7 inches high. And I have a 3/4 rabbit in there. I make all my own frames. That's the only thing I make because it's made out of scrap wood. I use 1 inch and 1/8 hole in mine. The earlier ones, we used a 3/4 hole, but they get a little too hot in the summertime. And then when we put our grooving, the top bar on those mini nukes, we just put a piece of starter strip in there and we paint them in. We dip a paintbrush into hot wax and just draw a little line across there with a paintbrush, and what wax goes on, it'll hold that in there.
Okay, I was just wondering, you know, about the landing board, because I know if he's a landing board there, they tend to robber bees and so forth. It's a place for them to land and rob them out and so forth. If it's only a hole for it to fly in, it looks as though it might be the better way.
What we do on the mini nukes is what we take a 2-inch square of hardware cloth and we'll put it like a triangle with a thumbtack in, and then we open it up and just push that thumbtack in, and when we want to close it, we put a couple of bees in there and then close it. The thumbtack just acts as a pivot.
Okay, that's all I have.
Try to keep it as simple as possible. If you try to make landing boards, they don't stack well when you're storing them. And that's the whole thing about, you know, when you're building your stuff, you want it pretty much uniform.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Pat. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? My daughter hooked me up with a new little fangled thing tonight. We got a lot of family here. But sorry I didn't write your name down, but the guy that is selling honey in his little farm stand and wants to grow, biggest advice is to make sure that you learn and understand the bees before you try to get too big. Take Don's class and understand what the bees need and build your reputation, because that's going to sell itself. I don't advertise and I can't make enough. And for the guy that was asking about selling medium nukes and they don't sell well, they sell just as well as deeps. It goes back to the reputation of your bees and what you're selling. And it's easy to transfer from a medium frame to a deep if they want to use deep frames eventually. Just make sure that you offer a little extended education maybe, so that when they take that medium nuke home, they can call you and say, okay, what do I do next to move it over to deeps? But next year, that guy's going to come back and buy again. So that relationship that you build locally and your reputation is what's going to sell. You won't even have to advertise. That was the biggest thing, was to make sure you understand the bees. And Don's class is excellent. I'm going to try and get to Georgia this year.
You can see if people come here and get a picture taken out in the bee yard, it sells the bees, believe me. It sells the bees.
Yep. That's it. Happy Thanksgiving.
One thing, a little late. I've done 8 of my turkey. One thing I would suggest to people is, if you have a job and you're going to sell mediums, you're either going to have to run 3 mediums together. What we have done and found out works the best is we run a deep with a medium on top. That way, if you don't sell it right away, or if you're working and you only have weekends, if somebody comes up and says, I want a medium, you got brood at the top, put the queen in the top, sell the top half. If you want to sell the bottom, you take the queen in there. That way you have two options. You'll never have bees that you don't sell. There's always going to be a market for them.
Okay, no one's got their hand up. Any other questions out there?
Maybe Mark would comment a little bit. If any of yous that want to do any pollinating and that, or are thinking about it, he might have a little information there for you. You have any information for him, Mark?
Hey, Don. Hey, I just wanted to say that Pat was right on. I liked what she had to say about the business part of it. You know, learn how to keep bees before you really get going on much anything else. Don't try to make income the first year you have your bees. Learn how to keep your bees first. And then when you do get into something, you know, I guess I'm a little bit diversified in my income streams, but I have, you know, this is what I do for a living. So I not only do honey sales, which is probably about 3/4 of my annual income, but I do pollination also, which is the other 25%. I'm thinking about cutting back on that, though. You know, I keep feeling like there's a lot more fungicides being spread around in these apple orchards and blueberry farms, and that isn't good. It may say on the label that it's not harmful to bees, but down the line it sure seems to be. We had a really nice conference over in Niagara Falls, Ontario last Friday and Saturday, and probably half of the talks were about neonicotinoid pesticides and their persistence, and how only about 5% of what's say that it's coated on the seed, and then there's so much of that that's given off in dust when the seed is planted, and so much of it that gets washed off of the seed and into the groundwater, and it stays there, and it comes up in puddles, and it comes out in the lakes and the rivers and whatnot. Only about 5% of it actually gets into the plant, which is enough to do its work.
Do you find by pollinating that you have to change out your wax a lot more often than you would not pollinate?
Well, you know, the combs that I have may be part of my problem as to why my bees aren't as healthy looking as they might ought to be, because I haven't really tried to rotate combs. I don't have a lot of new comb in my operation, but so that could well be a problem, because one of the other things that was talked about over the last weekend was kumafos,
Right.
which is the active ingredient in the Czech Mite strip, which especially all down south that have trouble with small hive beetle might use against the small hive beetle. But I stopped using that against the varroa mites over 15 years ago. But it was either 5 or 6 years ago, some pollen samples were taken from my hives and found to have kumafos and kumafos oxon, which is the broken down version of kumafos, in that pollen. And so it's either so persistent in the beeswax and it leaches into the pollen, or the bees are bringing it in, you know, from plants that have kumafos in their pollen. And the scientists say that, and especially the ag scientists say that no, it's not being used that way, so it must be coming out of your wax. And which is unfortunate that, you know, there seems to be no wax that no foundation that you can buy, no commercially produced beeswax that you can buy that doesn't have kumafos in it.
That's number one reason why that's why we do this. And that's why people, when I hold a block up like this and say, you're looking $25, $30, it's because you can run a test on that. We run 3 years maximum on our frames.
Yeah.
And we keep up with that. If you're going to mark queens, we've done a video on that there. The year of the color, let's say it's a red year. We'll put a dot on that frame of red and we dot the queen with the red. That way we know how long that frame is in there. And by us selling nukes the way we do, our frames are antique if they're 5 years old. I mean, we might have an out yard that we don't rotate out as much as we should. A lot of times we go to an out yard and we're shaking bees for packages. And if we get a little wild or we get some help that gets wild, now we'll sling a frame out that maybe hits the ground, the wax comes out. So it might get replaced. But this yard here, and we got several other yards, the frames are maximum 3 years because that's the yards we are pulling our nukes from. So that's how we keep up with it. And I thought when I started back in 90 that I really made a big mistake buying up wax mill. I said, oh, what did I do? I got all this money tied up. And back then, a good wax mill was $650, $700. But I seen the difference myself in 90 days just recycling my own wax. So that's the things that I have learned from observation. Now, common sense says, if you look at all your bee magazines, a lot of your large producers that are pollinating 1,000, 10,000 hives or 500, 600 on a trailer and take 5 trailers to California, with all the pesticides out there, if they have a big die-off, you think they're not going to salvage all the wax they can and melt it down, take it to the closest bee place and turn it in? That's what they're doing.
Well, unless they put bees on it. Unless they put packages back in it, which they do too.
Sometimes they will, sometimes they can't, because if they have a big loss, Greg Stallman had a bad loss about 5 years ago. He lost the whole tractor trailer load of bees because of that. Yeah.
So Don, it'd be interesting if you could send that chunk of wax off and have it checked for Coumaphos, because a friend of mine who produces thousands and thousands of nukes to sell each year. Some people in North Carolina might buy them. Other parts of the country buy them from a supplier in North Carolina. He hasn't used Coumaphos in ages either, and he waxes his foundation with his own wax. He doesn't buy wax from somebody else, and he's raising his nukes on nukes that never go to pollination whatsoever. And still, he's tests that have been done on his wax come up with Coumaphos in it.
What's the parts per million?
Pardon?
What was the parts per million?
I didn't hear him say that.
Yeah.
So it could be a very low parts per million, but it's still showing up. It's and I saw some people talking on I don't remember if it was on your group page or another group page about using Coumaphos or using Checkmate, and I was telling them that my advice would be not to, because it's a more persistent, apparently more persistent than the Apistan, because that was the first stuff we used, and that's not showing up.
Well, the thing about the wax contamination is depends on where you got your bees. I mean, there's a lot of people set down large operations next to, or within a mile or to 3 miles, say, of a hobby beekeeper's got 25. They could test one day 0 Coumaphos, and if that hives are sitting there from a commercial hive with a lot of them there, the bees might be getting weak. 1 hive or 2 hives die out, and bees from his hive go there and rob them out. You could pick up some Coumaphos because it's transferable through that wax. The same as when you go on pollinating for organic farms. There's no organic farms out there that the bees stay on. They fly out. And if the guy down the road from there is running some kind of pesticide 7 or something like that, you're going to pick it up. We live in a world that you have to be careful and you hope for the best. You do what you want with your bees and hope for the best. And the neighbors is the ones you have to watch out for.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, we've got a couple questions here. First up is Ronald. Go ahead, Ronald.
Yeah, I've got an opportunity to put bees out on a cranberry bog, and I've got the opportunity to leave them there as a out yard. Is that a good idea?
How much they paying?
Well, that's just it. I don't know how to go about figuring out how to charge for something like
Well,
that.
How much are they spraying?
That's the other thing is I haven't checked into that either. You know, is what kind of chemicals do cranberry bogs spray? And they should be spraying them at night, correct?
Well, I can tell you a story about that if that's all right, Don.
go ahead.
So a friend of mine here in New York, he had 280 hives on cranberries. And I don't remember how many acres of cranberries that was. And the hives were around the edges of the cranberry beds. They weren't in the middle of the cranberry beds. And they call them beds here in New York, not bogs, because that's a wetland terminology.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyhow, the grower called him and told him he had to get a fungicide spray on. I said fungicide, but I'm not going to swear that that's what he told me. Anyway, he needed to put a spray. And so the beekeeper said, well, you're going to spray at night, aren't you? And he said, well, we'll try to. And so as an experiment, the beekeeper left him there. Well, long story short, he doesn't have 280 live colonies out of that mess anymore. It's down less than 80 live. So what I would recommend is if you think that your grower, well, get to know your grower.
Mm-hmm.
How many acres of cranberries does he have? How many hives does he think he wants? And what is he willing to pay you? And what is his spray schedule going to be like? And if he's going to spray, you want as much warning as you can so you can get the bees out of there. Because really, even if he sprays at night, depending on what he uses, it's going to have detrimental effects on the cranberry.
Get residue.
On
You're
the
gonna have residual, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I get $80 for pollinating blueberries down in North Carolina, and $80 on apples in New York. I'm going to $82.50 on the apples, and they're in there for about 3 weeks in the apples and about 6 weeks in the blueberries, because there are about 9 different kinds of blueberries being grown there, so they don't all come ripe at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what the going price in your area is. Where are you from?
Massachusetts.
Yeah. I know up in Maine they're talking $120, $140 per hive. But try to get as much as you can. Start high.
Yeah.
Offer him a price that he gets back on his heels on, and then you can come down. But it's awful hard to go up once you've started low.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is when I take a trailer out, I have a minimum. You got expenses to move your time. I try to get $75 a hive, minimum 20 hives. Now, if it's going to be a good location, trees or strawberries, melons, or vine crops, sometimes if they're not going to come in with a lot of herbicides and stuff like that, and they're going to give you enough warning, a good year-round lot, I might cut $10 off for a year-round. But in order to make it pay for it, you're going to have about 40 to 50 hives to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And then you're not going to be able to count on honey flow. You're going to have to feed. So make sure wherever you put them, you have access to get in and out without, having to tear up a field. That's
Okay.
the main thing I have problems with, because with a big 1-ton steak truck, They have narrow roads, and they're always bitching about their trees. You caught a limb, you're pulling a limb off, and this and that, you know. So rather than, you know, you don't want to hear it.
Okay. Yep. Because I was wondering that, you know, the problem is if getting in there while the cranberries are on, you know, they got to feed for the bees for the cranberry flowers, but after that, everything dries up, you know. Then
You got to watch cranberry bogs. You're going to get stuck because they flood them a lot.
Yeah.
So what else is around there, Ronald?
Basically cranberries, and then it's all sand. You know, basically all sand. You got blueberries, and you got more cranberries.
Are you talking about out on the Cape?
Yeah, down on Plymouth. You know, down that area. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but then you got the big guys coming in with their bees. You know, a lot of the local beekeepers, the backyard beekeepers, their bees get robbed out by all the big guys. You know, so if you're not big enough, or the small hives, once the guys come in with all the trucks of bees, the small hives get robbed out. So a lot of the backyard beekeepers, their hives are done. So, you know, the bees come in so how would you say, so hungry, and anybody with local small hives, they can never keep them.
You when you was here, you probably understand now why we feed a lot.
Yeah.
I would rather feed than put them on someone's pollinating, and half the bees are dead. I sell bees, and bees have to be alive when you sell them. And when you go pollinating, them bees ain't gonna be right for a while.
Yeah, yeah. And then he offered me to keep them there year round, you know, the spot to keep them, and that sounded pretty interesting. But
you'll be feeding about 8 months of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in your situation down there, I wouldn't do that. I have bees on 80 acres of cranberries up here in New York, but there's also basswood trees around there, and within flight distance of the hives, there are farms that you know, have some clover. There's some pasture land around. Horses graze on it, cattle graze
Down
on
that
it.
way, it's a lot of pine. A lot of
Hard to make honey on pine.
You know.
They build up bees, though. They make a lot of pollen.
Yeah.
But see, that's what I do.
Yep. Okay. We'll let somebody else go.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Pat.
Yeah, it's me again. I was wondering if Mark could talk a little bit more about fungicides, because the guy that rents our land is convinced that there's no harm in fungicides. And so I've kind of not stood against it too much. And everybody knows I have bees. When he sprays, he notifies me in advance and everything. But I need to know how to talk to him about the fungicide, what's wrong with it, what does it do to the bees, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that can be a bit of a problem. It's more observation than verified fact, I guess. But it seems like the fungicides will have some effects on the queens later on. So I do somewhat back-to-back pollination. I do the blueberries down south and then the apples up here, and then I put the bees in their summer yards. And over the summer, I lose hives. And some of that's due to queenlessness, some of that's due to viruses. So it's not a real verifiable sort of thing, but I'm considering giving up $23,000 worth of income to see if my bees are better off not doing apples after they do blueberries. So maybe I'll have something to say about that if I can kick the habit.
And you think it's because of the fungicide?
Yeah, because supposedly they're not spraying anything else. One thing we have questions about here in New York, amongst a number of the other even larger commercial beekeepers than I am. I try to run 500 hives, and many of the other beekeepers that I pal around with are running thousands. And it's tank washes. Is you use the same, they don't really clean the tank out once they put a pesticide in there, and then later on they'll throw your fungicide mix in there and spray. Well, they didn't sanitize the tank, but nobody can get any kind of data on that and take any tests. I guess I would just get with the person that you're talking about and, you know, see what kinds of fungicides they're using, and then maybe talk to your agricultural specialist in your state and say, this is what somebody's going to be using, and should I really be concerned about that? Where are you from, Pat?
Virginia. I'm right on the North Carolina line, about 50 miles from the coast.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
out in farmland. Surprising Suffolk.
Surrey County?
No, Suffolk.
Oh yeah. I used to live in right outside of Williamsburg for about 5 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not too far away.
Been across that ferry a number of times.
Yeah.
Actually, my bee mentor is Lou Lecomte from Williamsburg. He's the guy that really got me started in bees.
Okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
somewhat familiar with your area. So is that peanut country? Is that where your bees are working?
Absolutely. We were 100% peanuts until about 8 years ago. The government bought out all the peanut allotments, so they won't buy your crop if you plant them anymore. You can plant some for yourself, but they don't. It's not a large production like it was. They sent it all to South America, but they do soybeans, and my big honey crop is cotton.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of cotton honey, and it's
Pork
good.
peanut, that's kind of hard on the festival, isn't it? Then, because the pork peanut.
Yeah, we still have the festival, but we don't grow peanuts anymore. And there was about 8 different factories here. It was a huge producing area, but the government sold it all to South America. We don't do any anymore.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is, because it was a good crop.
Well, I wish I had more I could tell you about the fungicides, but my knowledge is limited.
Okay.
Maybe the only thing you can do is to a smaller amount of bees and test them. It's going to take you about 5 years to get into pollinating and really make money at it. You could probably put 5 hives or 10 hives in a different place, see what yards produce and what yards don't. Kind of keep up with your losses. That's one reason we try to limit our pollination.
I'm leery of pollination services because of bears. You have to be real careful. I'm maybe a mile from the Great Dismal Swamp. We have black bears, and they love honey. So
put up good fences before the bears come to visit.
Yeah, I have a very large dog.
I think bears like dogs, don't they?
Probably little tasty tidbits. Yep. That's all. Just want to know about that. But thanks.
Well, a bear fence is kind of useless if the bears get into the bees before you put up the fence. Because it's been my experience and my observation that once the bears get a taste for the hive, you can put up a really good bear fence and they'll still go through it.
Yeah, they like honey, and they like the bees too. They'll tear them up and eat everything.
Well, it's the protein in the hive they're actually going after.
Right.
The honey is there, and it makes it sweeter for them. But it's the protein in a hive is in the brood and the bees.
Mm-hmm.
Do you put up bear fences where you are, Don?
No, we've only had one bad experience up by Dahlonega. But I do have several students that run a lot of hives up in Sourwood country, up by Blairsville. And what they've done is used, it looks like a school ladder that on a gym set, and they put them up 8 foot. And they put 10 hives up 8 foot, and they grease the poles. They're made out of steel, and they're permanent. They're inconvenient to work, but since they've done that, they don't lose bees to bears. But I've lost 16 hives on one row to deers on my property here, because I learned putting too many hives on one row, and then the deers come up, they rub their antlers, and they push the whole row over. So
Yeah.
we go to no more than 6 on a row now, and it seems to be a little more stabler.
Well, you mentioned sourwood, which prompts a question that a neighbor of mine here had. He was hearing something about sour honey being good for cancer patients. And I automatically thought that he meant sour wood honey. Have you heard anything about that, about sourwood honey being something that cancer patients might have benefit from?
I haven't heard nothing about the honey other than Manuka honey, but now I have sold propolis to several people that make tinctures for cancer.
Yep.
We sell it $60 a pound, shipped in a flat rate box, and we can usually get a pound to 2 pounds in there.
Okay.
But sourwood honey, there's a lot of old wives' tales. Mountain laurel is supposed to kill your wife or your mother-in-law, and bees make it. You know, I think it's an old wives' tale, but they say if you have mountain laurel honey, it'll hurt you.
Well, don't cross those old wives now. All right, I'm gonna listen a while.
Okay,
thanks.
Okay, next up is Anthony. Go ahead. Anthony?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead.
All right. That Ron Stockwell guy, he talks just like me. I grew up in Randolph, and my last 10 years, I grew up in Pembroke. I finished up in Pembroke before I left. Last chat, right at the end, we were talking about queens, and we were already 30 minutes over, so I didn't ask another question. But when a queen leaves to go on her mating flight, goes on the mating flight, and you said when she returns, she brings back bees with her. Where do those bees come from?
Other hives.
Other hives.
It's the same thing as if you go down to a bar and all the Navy's in there, and there are 4 or 5 women pull into the bar, and when they leave, about a whole bunch of the guys leave. They didn't come with them. If the queen has got good pheromones, she's going to attract workers from all the different hives. It's just natural.
All right, that's the connection there, the pheromone.
Right. The pheromones. It's a young queen. The pheromones are strong.
All right, because I was thinking the bee knows which box they belong in and where they left, and they're focused on that. I'm wondering, well, how the hell does these bees, where do they come from? Now I understand.
But you know, is when you're talking about queens too, a naturally made queen cell, or what you might call a swarm cell, is far superior to a grafted cell, because I think it's the pheromones too, and the queen itself.
Yeah, I would tend to believe that. I think natural is better.
It's just the old ways of doing it. It's just like the new ways to use the plastic queen cells. I've liked the old ways of making them out of wax. That's the way that I've always done it, and it seems to work the best. And I've tried both. And the natural drawed ones where we can cut cells are far better queens.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sometime between now and the next chat, I'm going to requeen 3 of mine, because I don't know how old those queens are. And right now, there's only one that's really laying, and even she's not laying a lot. So
you might have a mite problem. You can actually look at the queen, and you can kind of tell how old she is. An older queen is going to have less hair on the thorax.
all right.
There's an old story about hen pecking. The bees will actually start pulling hairs off that queen when she's not doing what she should be doing.
And we're supposed to be coming into our honey flow now from December to April. So I don't know, is this queen getting old, or is this queen not laying because it's equivalent to the end of the winter where you are? You know, they're not laying during the winter, and this is like the end of our time. We're coming into our spring and honey flow now. So
When
I
you
don't
say
know.
your queen is not laying, you mean at all or some?
Some, but very small.
Okay, well, that's a natural process of some queens to slow down. Queens do lay 12 months of the year. That's just nature. They're not going to stop laying. They're going to lay a smaller amount. It's just reproduction.
Mm. I don't know how old they are and where we're going to come into the honey flow. I want to give myself the best shot, so I'm just going to change them out. And I know these will be new, freshly mated queens.
If you have a queen, I would check, make sure you don't have mites, because most of the time it's a mite problem, not a queen problem. And if you're going into a queen or a good honey flow with an untested queen, that's like, you know, my boat has a small leak in it, and going out and buying a new boat, it's got a big hole in it. And you get out there, you don't know.
That's my point. If you take a frame out of the box and you're looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
you can see mites on the bees if they have them, right? You can see them with naked eye, right?
Not necessarily. I tell people, when you see mites, it's already too late, because the majority of the mites are being born in the capped cells. So you're only going to see the mites that are attached to the bees.
I've never seen one. I've never seen one on a bottom board.
Once they get heavy, you'll see them. It looks like a red freckle on them.
Yeah, I know what they look like. And just the other day, just 3 or 4 days ago, when I was going through one of them and it was bright sunshine, one of the things I was looking for was looking to see if I could see a mite on any of the bees, or if I saw tattered wings or anything like that, and they all look fine.
One thing you might try, I know I got a lot of the younger people that come up here that are more high tech, and I've seen some of the videos you put with your camera. So take a camera and take a picture of them and put it up on your laptop. You can blow that picture up 100 times and you can see anything that's on that bee.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think you mentioned that last week.
Yeah. Mites is usually your biggest problem. You know, people are not treating with oxalic acid enough. Once or twice a year is not enough. You need to do at least 3 in the springtime and at least 3 before you go into fall. We like to start treating them good in August. You treat August, September, and in October. By November, you shouldn't have a big mite load. Just a light treatment, you should be in good shape.
I'm going to be going, when I go to the bee farm to get the queens, I'm going to have a good talk with them about, I haven't asked them those questions yet, you know, what are they seeing for mites? And they would know better than me, of course. I'm going to get their view on what they see for mites in their business. All right, I'm going to stop, and I don't know if anyone else has a question. I do see some new faces, and if you have a question, don't be bashful. Just ask a question. I think some of you are new. You have a question, and you're hesitating to push the button. You came here for the chat. Don't be bashful. Ask a question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Dan, I've got one question about wax rendering. It seems it's coming out green-gray in color. How would you...
Green-gray?
Yeah, in
that
color.
Sounds like you melted a frame down of wax that had a lot of pollen in it. Or you've left it 2 or 3 days in the water and it's starting to mold.
Is there any solution to that? Would you do more rendering with that, or how would you clean that color
You probably could. The block of wax, I would take and wash it or just rinse it off really good with a hose and then remelt it. I try to take, when I do my wax melting, it's 24 hours, it cools down, I pull it out, and then I rinse it off. I stack up my thin pieces when I do my first one. And then once I got 6 or 8 little discs, then I melt them into the second one. And then I use a bucket. So by then I got a 6 or 8 pound block. And usually there, you just got a very little light gray propolis on the bottom. And by the time it goes into the sheeting machine there, where we make our sheets, it's almost clean.
Okay. Next question is Pat.
Yeah, it's me again. The green gray wax, what kind of pot are you working your wax in? What metal is it?
That was actually Wayne asking. I'm going to unmute it for you.
It might have been a copper pot.
It could have been, or aluminum. Sometimes it'll leach into your wax and make the color weird. So I would check what kind of pot you're using for that. And for Anthony, the queen's not laying. You're in really early spring. You need to be feeding them. There's nothing much for them to eat, so they're not laying because there's no food for the babies. Have you, what's their pollen source? They're not going to have brood if they can't feed it. So, you know, where are they getting pollen from? Do you need to give them some pollen patties just to give them a boost? Maybe lay it out for them to come and feed off of. Don't put it in the hive because you feed the hive beetles that way. And by the time you see mites, the load is so heavy that they're everywhere, and that's all you can see is mites. So if you don't see them, that's a good thing, but they're still there. And I was a very, very hesitant chemical user until this year, and all of the research says that we are not treating for mites enough, that it's more of a problem than even the experts thought it was. I use powder sugar dustings during the summer, and I do brood breaks in the spring because the mites reproduce in the brood cells. And so if you stop that with one cycle, you can also do drone cell pulls. So if you don't want to just, you know, treat constantly with the chemicals, there's lots of other methods that you can look up and see what's available to you. But yeah, by the time you see mites, you've got a practically dead hive and the mites are everywhere. So you need to be treating more proactively. And I think that was all. I think this time.
Thanks, Pat. Next up is Bobbin. Go ahead.
Hello, Don.
Hello.
Hello to everyone. About pollen, I got a question. Do you use pollen trap?
Do I use pollen traps? No.
Yeah.
I let the bees use the pollen because I make bees. The more pollen, the more bees they make. So I don't harvest pollen at all.
And something more about pollen. I got poisoning before maybe 8 or 9 years. I was in linden tree woods, and after that I stay in hive. I won't wait the hive, but in that period corn was blown and bees go on corn, and that corn was treated with gaucho.
Yeah.
And after maybe 5 or 7 days, I go on my bee yard in that forest, and believe me, I got 100 hives, and I stay with only one. I forget pollen traps in that hive. Every other hive was full of pollen, and that is my first experience with the poison bees with the pollen and with insecticide. And I don't know, maybe someone knew it for that gaucho. They treated the corn and how I heard, they protect the corn all period of vegetation, that the plant, and that is a very big problem for us or for beekeeper. The pollen from the treating corn with insecticides.
Corn is one of the worst bees food that you can get for putting beehives around corn, because they're using systemic poisoning in that. It actually, they treat the seed as it grows, and then when it pollinates, the poison comes up through the plant, and as it's being pollinated, it's carried back to the hive. So if you're anywhere near cornfields of just about any kind, other than small farmers that are doing it for their own use, you're going to have a high insecticide and a big die-off. If it doesn't happen immediately, it's just slow. It's usually within 2 weeks.
When I go on my bee yard, I see many bees out flying outside the hive, but no one of them don't knew it to enter in the hive. I heard that poisons do something with neurosystems, and all bees die outside hive, and queen and home bees die because eating that pollen. And I propose because very big contain of pollen, the queens also die.
Usually the queen in a hive is usually one of the last ones to die. If they die early, then the hive just becomes, real irritable, and the population just plummets. But you'd have to have a lot of concentrated pesticide for them to bring that much in at one time. It's usually a slow buildup.
Yeah, I got actually 3 box Langstroth, and the brood was in the middle box, and pollen, I got pollen almost because I used the 10 frames. The pollen was on the first behind brood, the full 10 frames of pollen, yellow pollen from corn, and I suppose it's be very much contained. And what next? It doesn't matter. Maybe someone others got questions, but
okay, we'll move on. Thanks. Next up is Mary. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, I have a question about moving hives. I'm going to change the 3 that I have to a different field. And we're just now it's getting down below freezing. So is it better to wait until the weather stays cold and I know that they're inside in the brood to move them, or wait till a warmer day?
Right now, the temperatures are getting cold enough outside that more bees are going to be in the hive. There's less bees going to stay out in the field. In a warmer summer day, when it gets dark, a lot more bees stay out in the field, or they'll stay in trees. I learned that moving bees into Florida. We used to go down at 4 o'clock in the morning and close them up, and then go back, daybreak, and start loading the truck. And there would be hands full of bees on the front of the hive trying to get in. So once it gets to a certain point, they'll just find a leaf to hide under. But with the weather as cold as it is right now, I would say an hour after it gets dark, I'd move them. You're going to lose a few, but not that many.
Okay, thank you.
And then just open them up when you get up to the other location.
All right. Thanks, Don.
Okay.
Okay, looks like that's it for the questions. Anyone else?
If I was going to ask Mary where she was from and what the temperatures are like. It's, you know, if she's south, you're going to have more activity. Your bees won't be as clustered. But where are you from, Mary?
We're from Middle Tennessee,
All right.
and the temperatures are running. Today it was up in the 50s, but it's getting down into the 30s at night.
Yeah, so I would think they'd still be loose clustered, but you should be able to move that hive without it being harmful to the bees.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be going down to South Carolina next week and messing with a bunch of mine, seeing what they're doing, see what they're up to, and I won't have any qualms about picking them up and putting them on the truck and driving them down the road and putting them back on the ground. And you know, if it stays cool, I might not even bother lighting a smoker, see what I can get away with.
Okay. Where in South Carolina?
Well, it's about 35 miles inland from Myrtle Beach.
That's my family's down there in Cheraw, South Carolina, which is not that far.
Isn't that over near Hemingway? And
That's exactly where it's at.
yeah, I used to hang out around Hemingway for quite a while. But I had my bees closer to the North Carolina state line now, over near 501 and along the P River. Yeah.
Okay, we will move on to Stephanie. Go ahead, Stephanie.
A question on moving the hives. It's still, like, it was 78 here today, and I just want to move my hives like 40 feet. Should I wait till it gets cold?
I would wait till they get cold. You know, that's too close because they're going to go back to the original the location you had them, or the stand. But if you're going to move hives, be in the habit of fastening your bottom board to the box. We use 1-inch staples, you know, one in each corner, because I hate a bottom board to fall off while I'm carrying a box, because there's always going to be bees on that bottom board. When it hits the ground, there ain't nothing like a bunch of bees coming up in your face.
Either that or use a ratchet strap to strap the whole thing together.
Well, you could do that, but the disadvantage of a ratchet strap is you got to have a lot of ratchets for 500 hives. Plus, a ratchet slat, they'll slide. We use a 1-inch staple that it goes halfway into the box and then into the bottom board, so it doesn't move at all. So you just have to figure your best.
Okay, so just wait for it to get colder though before we move them?
I'd wait till it gets cool. Let it get down 55 and below. When it gets down like that, then move them. And then what I would do is I'd leave them screened up for a day.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, Pat, you're up next.
Well, the only thing that I had a comment about the moving the boxes, you got to watch the temperature because they cluster when it's cold around the brood. And sometimes you'll have brood in the bottom box and brood in the top box, and you'll have a cluster right covering both boxes. And if you move them in too cold of a weather and break that cluster, you have some messed up bees and you lose some brood. So just kind of, I would stick around the 55-degree mark, not much colder than that for moving them.
I don't know if she mentioned that she had singles, doubles, or triples, but when we move our bees, we normally move them in singles. Very seldom do we ever move them with a super on them.
Yeah, exactly.
And right now, they should be in singles right now.
Yeah.
I believe she's in Texas, so it's probably a little warmer over there. She might have a super on them.
Okay, that's all the questions here. You want to wrap it up for a night?
Okay, no one else got a question? Going once, going twice, gone.
Okay.
Thanks for everybody showing up. Appreciate it, Tom, for watching.
You're welcome. Have a great night, guys.
All right,
good night.
Good night.